the animated series finally solved the mystery of what actually happened 4 years after one of Rick and Morty's most recognizable locations appeared to be destroyed. It should come as no surprise that the main duo has traveled throughout the multiverse, adding new dimensions and intriguing settings as the show has been running for more than 10 years. But one, the Citadel, has established itself as particularly significant. The Citadel was destroyed by evil Morty in the Season 5 finale, and Rick and Morty Season 8 hinted at its reconstruction after serving as a home for innumerable iterations of the main characters. Rick Murai Jack was about evil Morty blowing up the Citadel of Rick's, which killed nearly everyone who lived there. Fortunately, a few people survived, the majority of whom were clones. Given everything that transpired, it appeared that this would be the final time we saw this pivotal location in the franchise. However, the Rick, the Mort and the Ugly surprisingly brought the Citadel back, at least partially. Although the city was destroyed, a number of clones sought safety in the remnants of the safe haven, and Rick and Morty Season 8 provided them with a new beginning. There weren't many other survivors, which isn't surprising given that the main Rick and Morty characters on the show barely made it through the Citadel's devastation, but the location wasn't entirely lost. The clones were moved to the site's ruins because the Citadel served as a hub for spare parts, even though everyone was sucked back to their original realities during the aftermath. These clones may or may not have been in the Citadel when it was destroyed, but they all teleported to the remnants of the city and eventually established their own town where they sought safety. Even though it was rather basic and dilapidated, it at least gave these Mortys a place to escape Rick's authority. In spite of their lack of resources, the various Mortys that were depicted in Episode 3 appeared to come together and support one another. Even though there appeared to be a shared dislike of Rick's, one iteration of the character stayed just outside of town because homesteader Rick regularly traveled to the town center for trade, keeping the community afloat even though he didn't seem to respect Morty's. Hog Boss Rick appeared to be in charge of the Citadel's reconstruction, providing incentives to anyone who would find and enslave any Morty clones. Furthermore, the Rick clones were successful in creating a more opulent setting than the Mortys, and Season 8 focused particularly on the abusive tendencies of the majority of Ricks, particularly when they are directed at Mortys. Homesteader Rick's role in Episode 3 is all the more noble because it demonstrates how morally bankrupt most versions of Rick are by choosing to rebuild the very city that doubles down on these power dynamics. Homesteader Rick, who sacrificed himself to gain the clones' freedom, swiftly rose to the top of the Rick, the Mort and the Ugly, despite initially appearing to have little sympathy for the Morty clones. Homesteader Rick's selfless deeds were all the more admirable because he was not a clone, unlike nearly every other character in Season 8, Episode 3. After Homesteader Rick was shot by the Rick clones for simply choosing to live close to the Mortys, he managed to get himself fixed up and set out on a mission of vengeance, driving his modified truck in the direction of the Citadel that was being repaired. He then accepted Boss Hog Rick's offer to return to his previous position, but instead of creating a normal clone, he created a massive Morty that managed to escape his captivity and started murdering the neighboring Rick clones. After helping to free the remaining Mortys, Homesteader Rick drove them to safety while remaining behind to battle the other Ricks. He persisted in his quest for vengeance despite suffering severe injuries and losing limbs, until Boss Hog Rick confronted him and scolded him. Homesteader Rick, in spite of his wounds, was able to detonate explosives, apparently killing Boss Hog Rick, himself, and the remnants of the rebuilt Citadel. Even though it was the character's only appearance, he made a lasting impression and turned out to be one of the most talented and admirable Ricks in the series. Although his conclusion was definitely bittersweet, the Rick, the Mort and the Ugly was a welcome change and garnered great reviews for Rick and Morty Season 8. Arcade Morty came back to create graves for Homestead Rick and Doc Morty in remembrance of their role in the mission, despite the fact that the Rick clones destroyed most of the town when they abducted the Morty clones. His journey came to an emotional conclusion, but just as he was beginning to feel at peace, the main protagonist reappeared, denying all that had transpired and accusing Arcade Morty of killing Homestead Rick. Although it's unclear what happened to him after the main pair departed, his conclusion implied that Arcade Morty might still appear in upcoming Rick and Morty episodes.